Yes, welcome back. Our colleague there, Lamre Lassisi, giving us a preview of what's likely to happen in Senegal today when the president-elect Diomaye Faye gets inaugurated. Of course, Nigeria's president, Bola Tinubu, is going to be there to receive the youngest president Senegal has had in a long while, I think, into the fold of the ECOWAS heads of government. But back here in our studio, let's look at what has the president and his team, what have they been able to achieve since inauguration? The policies, the economic policies, are they what Nigerians had hoped for? And what are the expectations like? Joining us in the studio here, we have Professor Tunde Olusunle, who's a professor of creative writing and author and a former special assistant to the president between 1999 and the year 2007. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Before you came in, we looked at some of the papers. I want you to start up on this one here. And I think the Nigerian Tribune, to be precise, so gave an overview of the number of out of class teachers there, teachers that are lacking across the schools, and that's coming from UBEC. Almost 200,000 teachers are needed to fill the gaps in our education system, especially at the basic education level. You being a teacher, how does that sound to you?
Well, thank you for having me in your studio this morning. It's actually a worrying trend because if we didn't have the opportunity of instruction by our teachers, we wouldn't be here. But I think a lot actually went wrong at some point with the devolution of some of these powers, to the lower levels. You find a situation where, for instance, funding for salaries for the running of schools get to people at the level of local government chairman, and a lot of these things want to be privatized, as it were, and prioritized over and above, the engagement of instructors and, supporting them at that level. Unfortunately, teachers will rank among the most penurious, in our socioeconomy today, which is actually very disturbing. And, we have to nip this in the bud, much as we have all the things that we're contending with. But, we cannot move forward as a country if we are thinking of breeding an illiterate generation, so it's a disturbing trend.
I mean, when we take a look at the sector in itself, the education sector in Nigeria, there's quite a lot that needs to be done. One of the major, when everyone looks at it right now, what they run to, first of all, is security, and the Safe School Initiative comes to mind. Mm-hmm. But you see, when we look at, generally, the policies of President Bola Tinubu and how it has impacted the education sector. From someone who works in that sector, are there ways that we can say, some of the policies, some of the economic policies of the president have impacted positively or even negatively on the education sector?
I think, in a number of areas, he inherited, pursuits that were embarked upon by, his predecessors. I go back, for instance, to several agreements and, collaborations between, say, ASU, the Association of University Lecturers, and the federal government on the other hand. You find an example, for instance, where government decided to withhold the payment of teachers the other time when they went on strike. And, they've been doing something like piecemeal, refund to them. This does not give, requisite encouragement to teachers. Well, yes, a process has been started. But you find that, for instance, at the level of, schools at the state level, the situation may be worse. I go, for instance, to my state. I'm from Kogi. We were barely managing the only university in the state, years back before the last administration came. And, just in 2 years, set up 2 other universities. Now, how do you cope? You're not paying those that were there. You are not providing infrastructure in the existing university, and then you are expanding the scope. So at the end of the day, what are you going to have, for instance, for development? People try to, miniaturize education just to structures or, to nominal confinements. And it goes beyond that. You have to put, institutions that can be sustainable. And, your own internal system must be able to generate something, to fund whatever you do set up. It's beyond bragging rights when you say, oh, I have 3 state universities, in my state. What is the state of the universities? What is the condition of the universities? Because you find, outward gravitations, where people have a chance. You're in a state university, if there are opportunities in the federal, you leave. And, in a whole lot of instances, people who move that way are almost not always replaced.
Yeah.
The private universities also provide all kinds of opportunities, So it's a mixed bag.
One would think that, I mean, looking at when you say the outward movement, you're moving from state to federal. Mm-hmm. One would think that with the unification, for instance, of the naira, when this administration came on, there was that announcement of the unification of the exchange rate by the president, and there was a lot of reaction to that. A lot of people were happy, while others were like, "Come on, it's not working for us." One would think that issues like salaries, emolument across board would be looked at. I mean, indeed, while the conversation is still on about whether minimum or living wage, while that conversation is still on, one would think that these things are things that should be looked at and focused on to ensure that there is no, how do you say it now, there's no need to want to, let me move out here because it's better on that side, but it's all together.
Well, because the funding capacities of the federal government differs from the states and the local government areas. I have university vice chancellors who are my friends. And the other day, one of them took a snapshot of his payslip and sent to me. Vice Chancellor, Federal University, he earned 701,000 naira. All emoluments embedded there. Federal University. I can tell you for free that the situation is worse or lesser in state universities compared to federal universities.
I'm sorry, 701,000 naira monthly?
Yeah, for professor. I'm talking of a professor.
That's over 500,000 naira.
It is, yes.
So 701,000 naira every month?
Everything, yeah. All his allowances put together.
Okay.
As vice chancellor. I don't know what the salary of a permanent secretary is now, but it would be good to look at it, for instance.
You think that's very low?
I think it's low. Well, government should do more. What is the value of a naira now? What we mean, therefore, is that vice chancellor, cannot buy more than 2 bags of rice for his family before he buys other items, fixes his generator, fixes his electricity, manages his borehole in his house. So where does it come to?
What would you think a perfect salary would be for a professor?
Maybe not perfect. Maybe we should say a working salary. A professor in Nigeria should earn between 1.5 to 2 million naira.
Every month?
Yeah. Because of what they put in. Yeah. I was brought up by teachers, and, I'm here today. You went to school. Yeah. It's a different situation. Post-graduation, 39 years ago, I taught in the secondary school. I got a job because I studied English, and there were vacancies for English teachers. My salary was 374 naira. 374. So years later, when I had an opportunity to go to the Daily Times, which was going to pay me about 600 and something, or 700 and something, I didn't blink. I took my bag and I left. It was better on the other side. Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the other policies of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, time in office, and how they've impacted. So we'll have a proper conversation about how they've impacted several other sectors apart from the education sector. Unification of the naira, that's something that has happened. The inauguration of the Economic Council. Of course, we also talked the removal of the CBN governor, that happened as well. Managing the float of the naira. Removal of fuel subsidy, of course, which is one that has impacted the country in such an immense way. dissolution of governing boards of federal government parastatals, the suspension of the EFCC chair, we saw that happen earlier in his time in office, appointment of the National Security Advisor, retirement of the service chiefs and appointment of new ones, and of course the signing of the Electricity, Student Loan and Data Protection Acts, respectively. Respectively, rather. So let's talk a bit about these policies. Have they been, I mean, we're seeing a lot of people in the country complaining about how their standard of living has gone down, but there's the promise of El Dorado. Is it something that is going to happen? Do you think that this days of suffering will ultimately lead to days of celebration?
Maybe not in the short run, because we've packed so much there, and, government tells us at every stop about the kind of liabilities that they inherited. Some of these things will have to be rolled over, before, things can begin to happen genuinely. Yes, for instance, government has also responded to the issue of the flotation of the naira, trying to, stem the tide, as it were. This again is an ongoing process. This is April 2nd. Where are we going to be on April 30, on that note, for instance? We talked about the service chiefs who are still trying to grapple with the security situation. Unfortunately, we've also had, incidents, of the killing of soldiers, in the line of state security, as it were. Well, we are hoping that moving forward, the requisite, the requisite empowerment of the military to deal with the security situation, in its various ramifications, insurgency, banditry, kidnapping, militancy. We hope that they're able to grapple with this. But sometimes I feel myself that our military looks a bit stretched. They are not supposed to be the first in the line for internal security, for instance.
Should be the police.
Yes, so how are we, helping the police to grow? During the Second Republic, the Shagari government, President Shehu Shagari built the police through Sunday Adewusi in such a way that indeed the military was scared. But, looks like there was a downscaling, of provisions for the police and, governmental patronage by way of subventions in latter administrations. So you find that, our policemen they are threadbare. Somebody just drops a bomb in the truck containing policemen, where he just dropped firecrackers. Understand? Look at the other day in Delta, 12 policemen were killed, initially reported missing, then confirmed killed. So, how are we then going, we need to strengthen the police to be able to do their own job. So that, that's especially on issues of internal security. Let's see more of our military, doing their own duties in the area of, containment of militancy, insurgency, and all that, in relevant places. You talked about a new regime in the CBN, yeah, and they are still trying to settle. Maybe we'll give them a little time and see how they go. But of course, the fact also has to be made that there have been fits and starts in some of the things that government has been doing. I take the example, for instance, of the student loans. It was long announced. A preliminary appropriation was made, and of course, which was considered small, minuscule, relative to what we need to do. Because, we're talking about education here, and talking about how you want to, help the young people by way of bursaries and loans to go to school. So, we really have to be serious about that beyond pronouncements and platitudes.
But, in all of these things, for one who's been there and seen how the president operated, you were a special assistant to the president. One would think that this administration looks set to change things in the sense that while the previous administrations boxed up departments or ministries, this administration has kind of opened them up, giving for, as they will say, the special advisor to the president, Amida, called it specialization, so that they're able to do better and impact more on the policies that go. But you don't think that's...
Well, the journey has just started. 4 years, which is the first term, is barely 10, 11 months. So we need to give gestation some time and see how it all works. I told you before, there have been, forts and backs on issues. I'll give you an example. Somebody was appointed to the board of the CBN and removed almost immediately because there was affiliation to another party. So more thinking through has to be done. That's what we know. You're supposed to do all kinds of checks, security checks, and indeed integrity tests at the level of, who is here. Is this somebody that's going to be on the job for 1 week and then we suddenly discover that the person didn't do NYC?
So some more background.
Absolutely.
As to the people who are implementing these policies.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at something that happened recently. Everyone is talking about this looting that happened in Kebbi State. And it's not the first time we're seeing this. It's almost becoming a trend, looting of food trucks. And everyone is blaming it on, the poverty in the land. And then, of course, there's the fact that palliatives are being rolled out. We're seeing that happening everywhere, even though there's looting going on, but there are lots of palliatives. There are people who oppose, the distribution of palliatives from the state governments. We saw Bishop Hassan Kuka recently basically saying this is undignifying to get people to line up for food. What do you make of it? The economic situation is what it is. You said that's going to take some time. We have to wait for it to happen. In the meantime, these palliatives are being rolled out. Is it undignifying? Is that something else? Is there any other way this could have been done? There's
a background to the poverty situation. What were the governors, for instance, in Kebbi, in similar places, what did their predecessors do? Cheap money from the center has made different levels of government very lazy and lax. Because every month they come to Abuja here, they get money from the Federation Allocation Accounts Committee, and governors in many instances warehouse this. They invite bureau de change operators, and they convert this to forex, and they leave their states to languish. So along the line of this cheap money from petrodollars, we forgot basics like agriculture, for instance. We were first an agrarian people before we became an oil-producing nation. Over time, administration from administration, they've always encouraged agriculture. Former President Obasanjo, when he was head of state, had Operation Feed the Nation. When it got to the time of Shagari, things like that were done. I'm saying this because the palliatives that are being shared now, which is causing crisis, we probably would have avoided that situation if we did more in the past. And, this is where I'm going. The other day, the governor of Niger State, Mohamed Bago, told us that he has already cleared 1 million hectares of land for agriculture. That's a serious governor. And we saw the farm equipment they've bought. Days later, we saw the same governor at table with Governor Sanwo-Olu of Lagos signing an agreement. Lagos State will buy off, substantially from whatever is produced from Niger State. Lagos State may not have the acreage, the land area. These are the things that we...
But they have the consumers.
Exactly. Before now, there used to be one rice in Lagos they called Lake Rice. It was Lagos and Kebbi. Now it's going Niger. So these are safeguards that we need to have built before this time.
Ayo?
Thank you, Kayla. Prof, the question that comes to my mind readily about this matter when we are talking about states, since we are talking about President Tinubu's policies, is whether or not states have policies and how those policies of the states align with the FG's policies so that there can be expeditious results that people can see quickly. It's that area of collaboration that I think some people might also want to understand whether or not you see states having policies and that those policies are known by the people and that they align with the federal government. I don't know if you can hear what I'm saying, Prof.
probably have to go through again, Ayo.
Okay, so I'm asking the question of collaboration. You have talked about states and whether what has the historical antecedents, things that they had done or not done before now, which is the background, as you say, to poverty. But then, since we are talking about President Tinubu's policies, in what ways do you think the policies of states, whether they have or not, align with the federal government's policies in the various areas in which the federal government policies are known to the people? Many people may not even know that states also have policies the way federal government has policies. What's your take on that alignment or misalignment, as the case may be?
Thank you. It becomes, I think it stands to reason that, the tail cannot be wagging the head. There has to be synergy between the federal government and the state government. At many levels, for instance, you see that, there are statutory collaborations. We have the National Council of States, decided over by the president and the governors. We have the National Economic Council. We have things at that level. We have the National Agricultural Council, So, things are supposed to titrate, both by way of ideas and implementation. The two sides can borrow from each other. I gave the example of Niger, but even before now, we had an example in Kwara State when Bukola Saraki was governor. There were the Zimbabwean farmers who were displaced, from Zimbabwe. And, Saraki made space available for them in Shunga area, of Kwara State. And they developed so well that they indeed had a helipad there, Now that is something to be emulated. So that was there. Bago of Niger State is doing something. David Umahi did something similar, maybe on a lower scale, when he was a boy governor. So, these are things that, we have to find a way to merge the top and the middle. Let me not call the state the bottom now, the top and the middle, so that we can service everybody. I think in one of the president's pronouncements, for agri development, some, they were specified acreages of land that were supposed to be, developed for various projects. That is like a template that the federal government, has given. So, but the states are supposed to now develop.
Well, there's something you said, Prof.
Policy that says,
my apologies, my sincere apologies for butting in. You said something very striking. You said there needs to be that collaboration. Are you suggesting that there is no collaboration between the federal government and states right at this moment?
There may be, but unfortunately, you see, because of the quasi-independence that the states also have, with all due respect, you can also have errant governors and, people at that level. People that are not synergizing with what is happening in space. Everybody conceives of himself, as a mini-god in his environment, And we have to note, by the way, that we're not in a military regime. So, if you come under the platform of, XY party, that is not necessarily the ruling party, you may decide to do things a bit differently in your place. But, if service to the people, if the interest of the people is what we have at heart, then, we have to find a way, to work together so that, we serve them properly.
Is it a challenge of understanding or a challenge of resources, or perhaps that of communication or marketing of those ideas by the federal government to the states so that they can own it as something that needs to go to Nigeria? Because there can be no Nigeria without the states.
Absolutely. But like I told you again, you can only push the horse to a point. Are you going to force him you're not going to force the horse to drink, So the system, like I said earlier, we have to find congruencies. We have to find meeting and melting pots in the general interest of the people. Sometimes, I said this earlier and with all due respect, once these governors are inherited, they have full security cover, and they are there moving around with their sirening convoys, they don't feel an obligation, even to their people there. there's a governor who just got out of office the other day in January, somewhere here in the North Central, who has not been seen since the day he handed over, because he's avoiding the EFCC. So he stays put in the government house where he has been for the past 8 years, as a surrogate now of the person he tried to install. So are we going to say that that kind of a person, was working in tandem with what the federal government would have expected or advised? So there are these exceptions, and it hurts at the end of the day.
So how then do we take this forward, Prof? Because unless that collaboration happens at the various state levels and regional levels, because there are those who have also advocated some kind of regional collaboration among the states, unless those collaborations happen, how quickly can we get to Uhuru or even get anywhere near Uhuru?
The thing is that moving forward now, we have to be very, very serious as a people, as a country, about leadership grooming and leadership recruitment process. People talk about recruitment. You cannot just go to the street and recruit. You have to know the quality of who you are recruiting. So, we have to take an interest in grooming, leaders of tomorrow. We sat in the council hall in the State House many years ago, and we were addressed there by President Obasanjo. And as at that time, he said to us, people say I have many aides, special advisors, special assistants, and personal assistants. That for him, as the precursor of the Fourth Republic, it was important that leaders be groomed. So if you find people, for instance, who have, pedigrees and have the experience, things will move better. With all due respect, in some particular instances, we find that the quality of leadership at the level of the state has actually been degenerating. We find states that have been able to stabilize. They've ensured some kind of, quality from one governor to the other. Donald Duke did a very good template in Cross River State. He was succeeded there by Liali Moke, before Ben Ayade came. There are instances like that. And these are people that have pedigree, so aligning with government policy, understanding, appreciating, and being able to interpret to their people, wouldn't be a problem. But there are, unfortunately, there are also freestyle politicians who, just come in with the money on the day of the primary, buy up the process, and have enough resources to rig the election. And so they are administering people who, in their heart of hearts, they didn't put them in office.
You're making quite a lot of accusations. No. I'm going to take you up on these accusations, Prof. We'll start with the one you said in Kogi State. Are you saying that Governor Yahya Bello has still been in the government house? Is that what you're alluding to?
Well, that's what we read. And, he's been cited in a few instances, on the entourage of his successor. But I didn't mention his name. I just said Kogi State.
Yes, but you just mentioned his name now. Okay, so that's an interesting point to note there, and I'm also going to take you up on a lot of other things. Let's talk about security agencies, because we need to cover the policies in their entirety. So let's start with these thefts that are increasing despite the militarization of some oil-producing regions. Okuama community, saw that very unfortunate story that, the whole country is still mourning. But what do you make of that situation? How are the security agencies performing if oil theft is still going on? We're seeing that happening across the South. Mm-hmm. And then we're also seeing the killings of a lot of these security agencies.
I think we have
what do you think is going on here?
I think we just have to develop the political will to police our natural resources. Stories are told about the first-time discovery of oil in Oloibiri, Bayelsa, close to 70 years ago. By now, I imagine that artificial intelligence will actually help us to track some of these things and minimize physical contact by our security people. How much land how much ground can they cover in the creeks? I'm sure, may their soul rest in peace. If our soldiers that were killed, were like in an open field and facing one another, the situation might have been different in Okuama. You know, I mean, but like I said, we have to find a way of making sure that we are able, by satellite or something, to see what is happening. You know, there can be a command center, the headquarters of the NNPC. There are things for us to learn in countries which also produce oil, but which don't have the kind of problems that we're facing here. Yeah.
A very interesting dynamic that we're facing here in the country. Before we let you leave this studio, I want to pick you on those things that you said. Because do you have proof that Governor Yaya Bello is hiding in the State House in Kogi State? We've not. You said he's staying there. He's hiding from USDC.
I didn't tell you.
You did. You said this. Yes. His name is Yaya Bello.
Yeah, and you know his name?
Yes. The country knows his name.
Okay.
So you said he's inside the government house and that he's hiding from ESDC. Do you have proof of this, Prof?
Okay, well, that is what we read in the papers. You know, and of course, we don't see him attending events. For somebody who was busy there for 8 years, you imagine he should be, winding down now. We should see him at ceremonials and all that, you know, but, I mean, you cannot just fit like that for somebody who was otherwise larger than life.
You know, while we're still, you're still asking the questions why a man who was larger than life is hardly seen these days. Maybe he might be doing like, what do you say now? Looking back, retrospecting, as in, how did I do? Checking, weighing his own effort, what he has done, what he has not done. But in the midst of all of that, yes, Kayla asked you the question about oil theft and what the soldiers are doing and all of that. But let's look at the mindset of the Nigerians and how they react to the operations of the security agencies, the operations of these ones who have taken the oath to give their lives for the protection of the nations. There used to be that thing when we see a uniform in Nigeria, everybody is like, yes, they are protecting us. But now, there's little or no regard for the uniform. So why do you think that's...
There's been a lot of watering down. Last year, I was, you know, about the time we're having a similar upsurge, and I was thinking in my mind, wow, once upon a time, Nigeria was the policeman of the West Coast. Nigeria woke up one day under General Babangida with Liberia tearing at itself. You remember the Charles Taylor insurgency and all that. And Nigeria led other countries to constitute ECOMOG. You know, we pulled 10 countries together, and Nigeria did the bulk of the funding. And, you know, we did so well that indeed the United Nations also told Nigeria to exercise oversight in neighboring Sierra Leone, which was in turmoil, and in Guinea as well. You know, and, you know, my mind just went to that role of Nigerian, you know, generals. I particularly like General Samuel Victor Leo Malu, you know, who it was who enforced peace, as it were, and conducted elections. I don't see I don't know whether we still have the Dogon Yaros today, the Shagayas today, the Malus, the Kupolachis. I don't know whether they are there anymore. Yeah. So we still have a lot of capacity building to do at that level.
Professor Tunde Olusunle, Professor of Creative Writing and former Special Assistant to the President between 1999 and the year 2007. Thank you for coming in this morning.
Pleasure. Thank you.